Hello, this is Keith Thomas, Chief Information Security Officer here at Pinnacle Financial Partners. And thank you for joining us for this special episode of our Pinnacle Fraudcast. With us today is Mike. Mike, why don't you take a minute to introduce yourself?
Keith, thank you very much for the opportunity, and to your audience, thank you very much for spending some time with us today. I spent 37 years in the U.S. Navy. I ultimately retired as a 4-star, ran the 2 largest cyber organizations within the Department of Defense, focused on both, quite frankly, penetrating networks as well as defending networks, as well as trying to understand the attackers out there, what were their techniques, what were their targets, what was their strategy, the digital forensics of their malware, as well as trying to defend critical infrastructure in the United States. So a lot of work with the private sector, and then broadly as a leader of cyber in the government, trying to work with others in the government to develop policies for the nation in cybersecurity and with our friends and allies around the world. A lot of fun.
Sounds like it. It sounds like you've had a lot of time in seat and a lot of time just watching how things work. So for you, as technology has changed over the years, we've seen a whole slew of different threats that have come around, right? I remember way back in the day we had Conflicker, and then, ransomware became the big thing that everybody was super concerned with. What are those new and emerging threats and risks that you see and that you think of that are upcoming?
So first, we have nation states, we have criminal groups, and then we have individuals/groups. So kind of 3 broad populations when we think about threat actors. Let's focus on the criminal piece, because that's the one that the majority of individuals are going to be dealing with. What's interesting in the criminal sphere is both the proliferation of ransomware and criminal activity almost as an economic ecosystem, where now it's become a series of capabilities that you can hire. You might have no technical background, you might have no capability. If you decide, I want to get in on ransomware, you can go online and you can find somebody, hey, I'll write the forensics, I'll do the malware for you. Hey, I'll negotiate and I'll be the interface with the target. Hey, I'll do the reconnaissance on the target for you and tell you how to actually penetrate it. Hey, I'll do the negotiations with the target, if you will. Hey, I'll do the cryptocurrency exchange. I'll set your wallet up. I'll do all that work for you. So it's really amazing how this has become not just a set of capabilities that the criminal actors themselves own, control, and execute, but it's now a series of commercial capabilities that you can pay for.
Commoditized now, yeah.
Exactly. The thing that's also interesting is how you're seeing an evolution from a focus in the criminal world largely on or solely on ransomware to now a proliferation of ransomware and e-business, email compromise. Now where we are seeing individuals receiving socially engineered emails that are leading them to believe, hey, you should transfer this amount of money, or you should move these funds, whether it's because I'm responding to something I think is from my boss, and this is a legitimate corporate communication and a legitimate corporate set of transactions, to many times personal, hey, this is a relative, this is a friend, need your assistance. We've come a long way from I'm the princess in Nigeria currently being held against my will, and I only need a few $1,000s so I can get out. We've come a long way from all that. And with nation states, you look at China probably being the most aggressive with respect to the United States. Look at Salt Typhoon, look at Volt Typhoon, where you're seeing the Chinese not only continuing the theft of intellectual property that we've watched for the last 15 years or so at global scale. Nobody does it at the scale that they do. But I would also argue now you're seeing them trying to place at risk critical infrastructure. Think of power, think of telecommunications, think of finance, transportation, energy, et cetera. And their willingness to be much more aggressive, to engage in much riskier behavior, that should concern all of us.
So, one of the things that I've been keeping an eyeball on is artificial intelligence.
Never heard of it. You think that's an issue? You think that's going to go anywhere?
Generative AI, when we think about artificial intelligence, I think that's what most people have on their brain right now is generative AI, your chat GPT-esque, items. What we see a lot, even here at Pinnacle, is an increase in sophistication in the attacks, right? On the dark web, you have things like Worm GPT, where threat actors can, they just hey, I want a new phishing email in English.
I want to be able to do this. Could you help me do this in 5 languages?
And it writes it, and boom, there you go, right? And so the speed to entry and essentially their speed to market, right? If we want to use business terms, so that speed to entry and the barrier of entry is a lot lower in phishing emails now, and they're a lot harder to detect. So when I think about AI coming up and just the immediate threats, it both increase in number of attacks as well as sophistication of those attacks. I have concerns moving forward in the future. Where does that go? I feel like it's that Spider-Man reference: with great power comes great responsibility. It's the same thing with AI here, right? So, what I just want to ask, I guess, about AI. What are your thoughts? What do you see from an AI perspective from a threat? Do you see it as good? Do you see it as bad? Do you see it as neutral?
So first of all, it's highly disruptive, particularly right now because we find ourselves in an environment where the attacker is using it more than the defender.
Yeah.
Now that's going to change over time, but where we are right now in this relatively early part of our journey in AI is that the attacker has been the most aggressive in its use. It's disruptive in the sense that it fundamentally changes so many areas. But what we have tended to view it, I think, the bias has been to look at AI as it's a disruptor. It's going to change things, and it's going to change things for the worse. Hey, I'm really worried about this. Now, I don't argue that there are some things, some aspects of it you should be concerned about. But there's a flip side to this. I'm going, just as this is assisting the attacker, this is going to give the defender speed, scale. It's going to help us optimize our manpower. Look, we remain woefully short of qualified individuals to fill our cybersecurity job openings.
I think last number I saw was like 300,000 just in the US
That's not
alone.
going to change in the immediate near term. So a technology that potentially helps us maximize the application of those humans that we have, I'm like, this is a good thing for us, guys.
Yeah. Do more with less, right?
Exactly. I'm like, look, what things can AI-generated technologies do that right now we have a person doing? So we can optimize people for the things that they are uniquely positioned to do, that the technology, as good as it is not as optimal as a human.
Well, I wonder if part of that is really just human nature to initially resist change. It's that we fear the things that we don't know. And there's always early adopters. There's always people that like it. But I think part of that is also that shift in attackers are much more likely to pick it up now. They're not as afraid. And I say that because from what I see across the industry as a whole, from talking to my peers, people like that, there's a lot of like, I'm not sure. Like, well, there's
a high
these
level of unease.
I
think it's a combination of. It's a significant change. We always tend to fear change.
Right.
The specifics of it are something that broadly most people just don't really understand.
Yeah.
Not a criticism, it's an observation. They just don't really understand it, and that which you don't understand, you often tend to fear or assume the worst about. I think combined with the fact that so far, at least as we've said, we're seeing it used much more aggressively by the attacker than the defender. So we're looking at largely through the prism of threat, which therefore generally we associate as a negative.
Right. So we've got a lot of emerging threats. We've got risks that are out there that are changing over time. Even in the last 15 years, risks have drastically changed, right?
But don't forget the opportunity. There is always opportunity in the midst of all this.
Well, and, I know it's a fairly common saying here where it's not if, it's when it occurs, right? And I don't know that necessarily is true all the time, but for many cases, there is a how do I protect myself? How do I limit the damage? What's the minimum
Plus,
damage?
if you always assume it's when, not if, you're
Yes.
just always better prepared. Hey, if it doesn't happen, that's great. And you're fortunate it doesn't, well played.
So what do you think people should do? Business, consumer, what are some things maybe they could do to help? You talked about business email compromise earlier. You talked about a little bit about ransomware, those kind of things. What do you think?
So I think let's look at it from the perspective of a user and then from a defender. From a user, the first thing I would do is, look, guys, we've got to be much more skeptical. Stop and think. Don't just automatically
I say that on
respond.
slow down.
Just let's step back. Does the email, for example, does this communication you're looking at, whether you're responding to a phone call, you're looking at a video, you're looking at an email, does it make sense? Is it something you've seen before? Does it fit the norms of behavior of your organization? Is this the way you normally do business? look at the specifics of whatever it is you're looking at. Is it visually look like it's legitimate? Read the headers. Read the first thing I always look at is I'm going, so this pretends to be a communication from company X. And yet when I look at the email address, it's not associated with company. I'm going, look, this is total BS. So just stop. Be skeptical. My bottom line is if I am uncertain about something, my attitude is I'm not responding. If it's legitimate, they'll come back and ask me a second or a third time. So you got to stop yourself from immediately knee-jerking and responding. Now, if you're a defender, I would argue it all starts with the basics. Build the strong foundation. So, for example, if your policy is we have end-to-end encryption, you need to review your system and make sure you actually have implemented end-to-end encryption. Yeah. As an attacker, the number of times I would look at a system we would be in and I'm going, this network owner thinks they have end-to-end encryption, but they've made several errors in the architecture and the actual implementation. They don't have end-to-end encryption. So go back to the basics. Make sure you understand your system. Every network, oftentimes in my previous life, we in the government would provide capacity to the private sector, particularly in critical infrastructure, think power, think finance. And we would send teams to those businesses. And oftentimes in the aftermath, either of a penetration or to kind of do an assessment for them about where we thought their network security was. And we would always start by saying, okay, show us your network topography.
Yeah.
And invariably, I would always tell the network owner, now, the topography you've just showed us, I will bet you when I actually do the scans and we actually go in and take a look,
It's
not the same thing. I'm going to find outward-facing internet connections that you're unaware of. I'm going to find firewall penetrations that use, again, it's not because users are bad people. It's because they're going, look, I got to get my job done. And the faster I get it done, the more efficient and the better the company is. I need speed. I need ease. I need to be more efficient and more effective. So being faster and making it easier for me. So if I have to bypass some of your cybersecurity controls in the name of generating those outcomes for the business, that seems perfectly reasonable to me. The number of people I run into where I'm going, okay. Now, do you realize by doing that, you have now created a risk that you have no knowledge of, you have no understanding of, and perhaps most importantly, the people that are tasked with defending this structure, they're not aware of its existence. So now you've created a risk that you don't own, a vulnerability that you have no knowledge or awareness of, and the defender doesn't know either. That's not a good place for us.
If I do this, what will happen? Yes. Yeah. So I want to make sure I'm following along with you here.
Sure. Because I'm very confusing for you.
No. There's just a lot of information here, right? So what I'm hearing from a consumer, from a user perspective, it doesn't matter if you're a business or if you're home in your living room. What I'm hearing you say are things like slow down, look at the context of the emails, what are being sent to you, is it reasonable, is it normal? You know, if you never use Amazon at work, why are you all of a sudden getting a shipping notification from them on your work email
someone
address,
you've never heard from?
Exactly.
Why is somebody contacting you at work on something that's personal?
Exactly. So I think that's the follow-up behind that is naturally skeptical does not mean it's bad. That's the other thing I'm hearing from you. It's okay to ask questions.
Yep.
When in doubt, one of the items we've always put out there is if you get an email that seems suspicious, don't reply to the email. Don't just pick up the phone and call the person from a known good number, the one in your phone book, the one in your, those kind of things. And hey, did you send this? Did you, those kind of things. So,
and a lot of times firms like Pinnacle and others, several of the things I do have established mechanisms where it's, if you're seeing something that you're uncertain about, give us a call. Or, hey, look, we're going to give you a sandbox to forward this to. We'll do an assessment of it, and then we'll get back to you.
That's very accurate. A lot of businesses have like a, report phishing button or those kind of things. And then from a defender standpoint, I hear you saying, hey, follow your fundamentals, make sure you have good controls in place, whether that's antivirus, firewalls, network protection.
And you have actual situation awareness of what is vice what you think is, so to speak.
Right. And if you don't have that expertise, then, work with a reputable third party to get
There's
there.
a lot of contractors and vendors that you can access that expertise.
Yeah. And so, I think the last thing for me, from a protection standpoint, whether it's business or personal, either one, what do you want to say to people that are a victim, that it has happened to them? What could you tell them, like, hey, this is the next thing you need to do. If you're, if whether it's a ransomware or business email compromise, wire fraud, whatever, it just happened to you, who do they call? What do they do? I mean, I think a lot of people just don't know what's supposed to happen, and they just kind of throw their hands up like, well, I lost that money.
Yeah. So if we're talking about something that's associated with your professional life, with work, you've got a corporate structure that's designed to help act and aid you.
Okay.
So it becomes much easier there in the sense that, as you've already highlighted, look, you've got, find phishing connections. You've got lots of expertise that's available to you. The harder one really is when this happens to you in your personal life. And I'm the first to admit I've had accounts compromised where I've had to start all over again, or I've had to reestablish access and drive the intruder out. The good thing is most commercial providers today recognize that this increasingly, sadly, is becoming a norm. So most businesses have mechanisms set up where you can reach out and say, look, I've lost control of my account. I can't access it. I'm seeing activity in my account that is not mine. I believe someone has accessed this. We need to stop that. So there's lots of mechanisms. But the biggest thing is don't sit there and ignore it or pretend, well, it's not my responsibility, or, hey, the credit card company will take care of it, or Amazon will deal with it, or my email server provider will take care of it. Help them help you.
And I think, the best recommendation I would have on that front, to tail along with you, is first and foremost, if it's a personal account, your social media, email, et cetera, contact the provider and try and work that out. If it's a business and you've had some type of fraud, especially if there's money loss involved, please reach out first and foremost to law enforcement. Make sure law enforcement is aware. It may only be a police report, but sometimes they do have resources that can help you out. On top of that, you'll also want to reach out to your financial services organization. Here at Pinnacle, we have a process for that where we will actually get the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network involved to try and recover those funds if it's possible. So I think it's really important to help.
You already knew all the answers. This is
of
not
course.
fair, Keith. You already knew all the answers.
No, I think it's important to note just a couple of other items there, because what you touched on was gold there. I really appreciate you being here, just visiting with us
Well,
today.
thanks for the opportunity.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
And to all of you, remember, cybersecurity is something that's critical both in our professional as well as our personal lives. And every one of us has a responsibility, not just our network defenders, not just our IT and OT professionals, but every one of us as a user, whether it be at work or at home. But thanks very much.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate it. For more helpful tips, visit pnfp.com/alerts.